Hello there everyone, your fluffy armchair Admiral Latur is back with some more hot ship action. In today's episode of Lots of Guns, series about Ultimate Admiral Dreadnoughts, we are going to talk about various warship types. It is not going to be a typical episode targeted towards specific ship or class, but rather informational guide on what is the purpose of various types of ships. We are also going to try to answer the question, why not build only one specific type if it's so powerful, and why waste time and money on ones that are so limited? The battle you will see is just background for our today's video and has nothing to do in particular with what I'm going to say. So let's start from defining type and class of ship so we all know what we are talking about. Ship class refers to a series of ships that share same general characteristics that is unique for all ships in the series. It may involve armament arrangement, type and caliber of such armament, armor layout and its attributes, etc. Ships of the same class very often have their names linked by common factor. In example, Italian Conte di Cavour class shared names of famous figures in Italy's history. Ship type refers to all ships that share similar characteristics, but they were built according to different designs, in different time periods, or even by different countries. They all share similar general characteristics like uniform main armament caliber, heavy or light armor, tonnage spectrum, general combat role, etc. So, now that we pretty much defined what type is, let's describe a few of most popular warship types, some of which we can encounter in Ultimate Admiral Dreadnoughts. I will not cover all ship types in the world in details, but I will try to be more specific about those ones we can use in the game at this moment, or at least in nearby future. So ship types can be split into three general categories. Capital ships, the biggest and the greatest of the fleet. They often act as flagships and possess the strongest armament and protection among all ships in the Navy. They also can encounter enemy from the biggest range. Types of ships that fall into this category are aircraft carriers, battleships, and battlecruisers. Escort ships, much lighter and smaller than capital ships. Their main task is to support capital ships or perform escort and patrol duties. They are generally a multi-purpose ships with their type-specific strength and weaknesses. Their main intent is to operate as part of a unit. However, they can also operate alone, but on a limited scale. Types within this category are frigates, destroyers, and cruisers. Special ships, which are ships designed to perform exceptionally well in specific tasks, with a limited combat capabilities. They are generally not designed to operate as part of main fleet, and often lack seakeeping capabilities needed to survive long voyages. However, in some circumstances, they can take some responsibilities of an escort ships. Types in this category will be submarines, torpedo boats, mine layers, minesweepers, corvettes, and coastal defense ships. Auxiliary ships. Ships with basically no real combat capabilities, designed to support Navy in specific non-combat situations. For example, refuel, repairs, tugging. Types in this category will include transport ships, oil tankers, and tugboats. At this point, in Alpha 5 version of the game, we can build following ship types: transport ships, torpedo boats, destroyers, unprotected, light, and heavy cruiser, battlecruiser, pre-Dreadnought and Dreadnought, referred as battleships. And unfortunately, as the game is in early development stage at this point, hull and modules selection is very limited for many of ship types like torpedo boats, destroyers, cruisers. Although those received some extra hulls and modules lately, so it's getting a little bit better. So, let's now talk about those types in more detail to highlight their role in the fleet and current state in the game. I hope to put some light on why sometimes those ships types seem to be unbalanced and why they in fact shouldn't be artificially balanced between each other. So first on our list are transport ships. In reality, often private owned, not designed to take part in military operations. Essential to transport various goods, commodities, troops, equipment, or anything that needs to be transported. Type of auxiliary vessel, because that is in fact auxiliary vessel, it is meant to support. And their main characteristics includes low speed, high cargo capacity, most likely no armor. However, during war some ships are being equipped with light armor plates to protect them against smaller caliber shells. And pretty much no armament, though same as with armor, some ships may be equipped with small caliber guns to protect themselves against small enemy vessels, surface submarines, or pirates. In the game, we can design those ships. However, until campaign is released, we can't really tell how various design choices will impact economy. So right now, we can push transport designs even as high as to be able to fight with light armored warships with quite good effectiveness, despite their actual role being different. Am I worried about those ships being poorly balanced? Not really. At least not at this stage, when all their mechanics will be in place and we can see how everything works in practice. When the game is closer to release and all the mechanics are in place, we might be able to actually tell something about balancing of different class or types. Right, so while talking about transport ships, it would be inappropriate to not mention about their escorts, and here comes frigates and destroyers. I will focus on the latter for now, as frigates would make a good material for a separate paragraph. Destroyers, by definition, are fast, maneuverable warships that are intended to escort larger vessels in a fleet, convoy, or battle group. They are an evolution of torpedo boat destroyer invented to defend the fleet from torpedo boats in late 19th century by Spanish naval officer Fernando Villamil. The idea and uses of this ship type evolved throughout the years. From fast ships to hunt agile torpedo boats to submarine hunters closer to World War I and throughout World War II, up to present times, when their role evolved even further with development of rocket technology. Their main characteristics are as follows: high speed, very light armor, small caliber guns intended to destroy even smaller or equal sized vessels, strong torpedo armament able to seriously damage or sink even biggest capital ships. Due to their high agility, they are also perfect ships to make best use of hydroacoustics to seek for underwater threats. Cruisers are another type of ship that is good escort, but also in some circumstances they are good ships to operate independently or as lead ships of a small battle group. They are the most versatile type of ships, with their good seakeeping abilities, medium size, good speed, relatively strong armament, although not as strong as the one on Dreadnoughts, and medium cost. They are the core of almost every fleet. Their name comes from their ability to sail over the distant waters, commerce protection, independent scouting, and raiding. They vary in size from relatively light unprotected cruisers to large protected cruisers nearly as large as Dreadnoughts. Naval treaties recognize types of cruisers mainly by their displacement and armament. I think a brief look at history of the class will explain everything. The term cruiser was first commonly used in 17th century to refer to an independent warship it referred mostly to smaller and faster warships. Why is that? Well, ships of the line, even though very powerful, were slow and very expensive compared to smaller warships. So having two or more smaller vessels that can do as well on the open waters and are faster and cheaper, but can deliver less firepower, was almost a perfect choice. It allowed navies to control larger area and spread their forces more, which was proven to be very useful, especially that by that time many nations with strong navy had some colonies in various places of the world that is mostly covered in water. Development of ironclads led inevitably to switch to iron and later steel hulls. However, those were quite heavy, and considering poor efficiency of steam engines at the time, ironclad battleships were just too slow to sail across the ocean. That's why frigates and other cruising vessels were still very needed if navies were to protect their overseas territories. So what navies did was to build those ships of wood, cover them in iron or steel plating, put some coal-fired boilers and propellers glue, keep the sails and mast, and that will be the ship we might need to be enough protected to sustain in a fight with heavy ironclad, but also be able to travel across the ocean. At around 1880s, when engines became more efficient and when shipbuilders realized that building ship entirely out of steel will give it enough protection and also make it light enough to improve its speed, the idea of fast, unprotected cruiser that is good to commerce raiding arose. Obviously, navies didn't resign from protecting their cruisers completely. Apart from unprotected cruisers, there were also slower, protected cruisers with their hulls thickened over vital areas. It was good form of protection at that time, and the use of steel let that happen. But that was not the end of development of cruisers and evolution of shipbuilding in general. First protected cruisers were already equipped with guns as big as 10-inch, so they could stand in a fight with much heavier ironclads and pre-dreadnoughts. In 1890s, the distinction between pre-dreadnoughts, battleships and cruisers were very blurry, as all of them shared so many similarities, but there were some differences that started to shape cruisers as a separate type of warship that we know today. They were offering a range of trade-offs instead of high-caliber guns. Present on pre-dreadnought battleships, cruisers had much smaller, 8-inch guns. Their armor was also much weaker, but in exchange, they could reach higher speeds of over 20-21 knots compared to battleships which were barely reaching 18 or 19 at that time. In early 20th century, further needs to implement fast and light armored ships that can hold for themselves at sea led to development of reconnaissance cruisers and later to development of light cruisers when propulsion became effective enough to actually build fast, seaworthy ships with decent firepower and at least some belt armor. Around the same time, an idea of a battle cruiser also arose. They were equipped with battleship-like guns and were armored like cruisers, which let them reach higher speeds. Last type of cruisers that was developed was a heavy cruiser. It was only officially recognized by naval treaties, and official standardization was somewhat different from reality, not to mention that those standards were recognized only by treaty signatories. Most of the designs involved no more than 10,000 tons displacement and no more than 8-inch guns, as it was signed by United Kingdom, United States, France, Italy and Japan in form of Washington Naval Treaty. But Germany, who haven't signed that treaty, built their Deutschland class that had just over 10,000 tons displacement and 11-inch guns, which were too small to be called battleships, but also too large to officially be called heavy cruisers. Although Germany named them exactly like that, with press calling them pocket battleships. In 1930, a new London Naval Treaty was signed by the same 5 nations. It described differences between light and heavy cruisers, as light cruiser to have armament of no more than 6 inch and heavy to have armament between 6.1 and up to 8 inch. No tonnage restriction for the class were described, although nations were restricted to the amount of heavy cruisers and their total tonnage they could have. Second London Naval Treaty tried to limit light cruisers' displacements to 8,000 tons, but 2 of the original signatories refused to sign it, and the treaty was in effect only for 3 years, handicapping United States, United Kingdom and France in what kind of warships design they can build. After Second World War, there is another gap in cruisers visible. Due to development of new rocket weaponry, many cruisers were equipped with this deadly new weapon. Some of them received different type classifications over years, and as there is no more naval treaties in place, every nation can freely classify their own description of a cruiser. In fact, cruisers and destroyers are so similar in size nowadays that same ship may be classified as cruiser by one nation, while according to official classification of their home navy, it is a destroyer. And finally, the one last on our list of ship types are battleships. They can be divided into 3 smaller subcategories. Ironclads, which are just early battleship designs with heaviest armor, heaviest armament and very, very low cruising speed. Pre-Dreadnoughts era battleships, which were evolution of ships of the line and both philosophies of first 2 ironclad designs combined. They were large, had mixed composition of large and small guns, and they were slow and heavily armored. Guns were also mostly mounted in casemates instead of gun turrets. Due to very early development of fire control and aiming systems, designs included vast amount of guns to compensate for poor accuracy with volume of fire instead. Dreadnought-era battleships, released after very successful and innovative HMS Dreadnought. Their main characteristics difference between pre-Dreadnoughts was uniform large caliber guns and centralized fire control that improved their effectiveness and introduced them to a new role of long-range gunnery platforms. Designs also moved towards turreted guns that allowed to reduce the overall weight of the ship while maintaining broadside salvo weight. And finally, we got aircraft carriers. Currently, they are not part of the game. However, from what I know, aviation and aircraft carriers are very likely to make their way into the game. So development of aircraft carriers began shortly after development of airplane in 1903 by Wright brothers. First successful attempt to take off from the deck of a warship happened in November 1910. In January next year, a first successful landing on the deck of a warship was performed. Further development followed after that with some minor successes along the way. In 1918, the first ever flat-deck warship capable of launching and recovering airplanes, HMS Argus, was built. As a result of Washington Naval Treaty, many of unfinished and decommissioned ships were redesigned as aircraft carriers. However, navies were also ordering first vessels that were designed to serve as aircraft carriers from the beginning. The first warship designed as aircraft carrier that was actually built was Japanese Hosho, and it was later followed by British HMS Furious. During Second World War, aircraft carriers have proven that they are the new king of the seas, and with their great mobility, very precise and powerful striking capabilities, they switched modern fleet tactics into carrier-based doctrine. Now, carriers are very comparable to floating airbase with thousands crew members on board. From small converted commerce ships and battle cruisers they turned into a fully operational forward operating bases with a self-sufficient floating airport. So, let's now talk about a balance for a moment. As you may or may not notice, the game is currently seen to favor battleships over other classes. They are very effective, their high caliber guns can one-shot many of light vessels, and they are able to win many encounters on their own, even against other battleships, if commanded correctly and with a bit of luck. As for other classes, you might think that there is no point in even designing lighter vessels, because one battleship can take them all. And at some small degree, it is in fact good point. In current version of the game, well-designed battleship does the job of entire fleet. But it will inevitably take damage in the process. And as many things in the game, including building and servicing warships, have their own cost, which will be tied with economical aspect of the game, which we are now unable to test. This leads to some issues with balancing application, as we can't compare all data to look at various ship types objectively to judge if some of their aspects need some tweaking. We can't tell if having one battleship will be better for us during campaign than to have, let's say, 5 cruisers or 25 destroyers, or what actual price slash effectiveness factor will be. It is not a secret though that even though 1v1 various ship types are better than others, because that's what they are designed for, when all the factors like numbers are put into play, that difference in sheer firepower is much less important for the final outcome of the engagement. I look forward to see the campaign and how it will impact how ships are designed and how various ship types will supplement each other in a fleet. The most important factor that would encourage players to use destroyers or light cruisers will be their ability to equip hydroacoustic and seek for underwater threats like mines, torpedoes and submarines, as those will also appear in the game in some form, though there is not much information about them, so I haven't covered them in this video. And that's it for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Please consider to bombard that subscribe button, use the bell afterward, and don't forget to sing some comments down below. Have a great day and see you all later. Later. Out.